downtown Grand Forks, home of the University of North Dakota. We begin with roll call.
Crary.
Here.
Doppler. Holt.
Here.
Kwame. Weber.
Here.
Whitney.
Here.
Wolf. We have a quorum.
Very good. Item 2, pilot loan request, block 5 properties.
Thanks. Item 2, pilot loan request, block 5 properties.
I don't know.
Mr. Gaustin.
I can talk about this briefly. The staff report talks about the development agreement. That's going to be subject to a public hearing that's scheduled for next week. Part of that, and I won't go through all the details. I think the agreement is it's detailed, but it's the one that you're most concerned about is Section 4, which deals with the loan of a $900,000 amount. There will be a promissory note. It requires a $55,000 a year payment. It's a 20-year amortization period. The last payment will be a little less because I anticipated that the construction will be done by the end of 2022. That's when the loan proceeds would be paid out, is after everything is completed. And so there'll be a short year where you won't have a full year of interest. So the first payment will be more principal than interest, which then results in the final payment being less interest, and it requires less of a payment. I think it's like a $34,000 payment at the end. And that'll be, those are estimates right now as to the end amount, because I don't know when they'll be completed, but that's what I estimated as December of 2022. We're also taking a mortgage on the property. It requires a first lien mortgage on the property for the $900,000, and then personal guarantees from those that are involved with the developer. There are conditions to the loan. One, the primary one, is that the project is completed, that we've got a certificate of occupancy with respect to the project, and that we get a title commitment that shows that we'd have a first lien against the property. Again, it's a 20-year amortization period. It's a 2% interest rate. There are early payment obligations if the pilot that's being offered would terminate early, and there are provisions that require that tax exemption under the pilot does terminate early if there is a default. There are other provisions under the Century Code with respect to early termination of a pilot. Or the other one is if they end business operations, that might terminate the pilot as well. At that point, everything is due and payable. We accelerate the note at that point. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward as far as the lending transaction is concerned. From the perspective of the JDA, it's part of 2 transactions, right? We're giving a proposed property tax exemption and a promissory note. They're interconnected in that you would assume that the property tax savings that the developer will enjoy for the pilot, those savings could be used to pay the note, but we're not connecting. You're going to pay the note irrespective of what you do with those property tax savings. You're the bank, you're borrowing the money, and we expect a $55,000 annual payments.
Very good. 2 quick things. First of all, let the record record that we've been joined by Ms. Doppler. And Mr. Gausted, let me try to put this in my limited understanding and see if this works. We're actually pursuing 2 things here, and when we talk about we're discussing the city, which will have to approve the pilot. The council will have to approve the pilot next week. The Growth Fund is making a recommendation to the JDA to make this loan. This is a creative approach to it. The pilot is a very traditional way of supporting this kind of development, but the JDA would be making a loan that would be paid back over time by the pilot, the revenue from the pilot, according to the terms that you've just discussed. And in doing it this way, it's both a streamlined process and a savings for all involved. That's
fair-
one way of describing what we're,
Very fair assessment.
okay.
And Mr. Weber, if I could say,
Mr.
and
Fields.
this was an alternative when the city council and our other local entities determined that this was a more reasonable way forward than doing a revenue bond, TIF revenue bond for $900,000. So we thought this was a mechanism to get to the end sooner rather than later. And they had a $900,000 gap up front. And so this is an upfront as opposed to just doing a simple tax exemption over a 20-year period of time. So it was a little unique in that way.
Right.
I should emphasize one more thing is, why should we do this? It is a historic building. We want to make sure it's done right and
Yes.
well. That's on behalf of the community. This is one more reason why we would want to make sure that we facilitate the renovation of a really iconic historic building in Grand Forks.
Good. That's where I was going to, Mr. Phelan. We immediately jumped into the kind of technical details of this. This is a way to address the development needs of a key piece of property right downtown, one of our main intersections across from Town Square. So with that noted, any questions or comments from committee members? And this will be going directly to JDA after this meeting tonight. That's part of the reason, one of the reasons for holding the special Growth Fund Committee meeting this evening. Thanks for being here, by the way. I should have started on that.
I would move approval.
We have a motion from Mr. Holt
Second.
and a second from Mr. Curry. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I think that's an aye. Or maybe not. Opposed, same sign. Looks like a motion passes. Ms. Dockler, were there any questions or comments there? I saw the microphone come on. We didn't hear from you. Maybe.
I just voted to say yes.
Great, okay, thanks so much. Item number 3, Corporate Center 2, lease renewal, Social Security Administration, under the auspices of the GSA.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. The staff report kind of walks you through the history of this building. GSA has been a tenant in Corporate Center 2 on the 3rd floor since 2007. Their lease expires in February. So when this building was put on the market, we were kind of actively negotiating with GSA on the renewal. So the first part of your staff report kind of lays out the existing terms that we're operating under right now, and you see them in various formats of, base rent per square foot. The upshot being we're currently bringing in with, the operating costs and everything, approximately $180,000 a year. With the renewal process, it is GSA, and it is about as cumbersome a renewal process as you can imagine. And so the staff report kind of lists the various forms. We did contract with AE2S or AE2S Nexus to kind of help us with that very technical piece of the submission. But the second page of your staff report kind of walks you through it in the same format as we displayed the lease rates that we're under now. It's the lease rates that were submitted in what we're calling our best and final offer that has been submitted to GSA, which would put the first year revenue at about $207,000 a year. So when it was advertised for sale, it was quite clear that, the lease will expire in February, but that we were actively negotiating with GSA. And we have been in frequent communication with them since we started talking to them about this in February. And we're pretty confident that the terms that are outlined in this staff report will be approved by GSA. We just haven't got that official word from them yet. So, again, the staff report talks about some of the details. The buyer, Grimsley Consulting, is kind of aware of all these terms. We will have a commission that needs to be paid that is, just kind of part of the package with GSA. And while we don't have that firm final offer from GSA or the actual lease document, I'm trying to kind of get ahead of the approval process and the timing with the closing of the sale to ask for Growth Fund approval of the lease terms or, materially similar terms as soon as GSA provides them. So that's kind of the broad stroke summary of where we were and where we're going. And now, all of this approval will be subject to city attorney review of the documents when we get them. And in terms of coordinating with closing, I'll hand it off to Mr. Gosted to talk about that. Oh, and by the way, we do have Ryan Graff from AE2S is available via Zoom if anybody should have questions about some of the details of the formal submission that they helped us with that went to GSA.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Mr. Gosselin?
Yes, the purchase agreement calls for a couple of things. One is those type of agreements or leases that exist, the buyer is assuming. Also, there is a provision about prorating of other operating costs furnished to or provided for or incurred for the property, they're to be prorated. So there will have to be some allocation of the commission through the closing. That usually is done through a settlement statement, is the way you'd allocate those type of costs, so.
The cost being this commission?
Correct.
So here, my understanding is that we have been a long-term, we've been the sole owner of this building since it was built. Long-term leaseholder to the General Services Administration with their Social Security office here. We were previously working to negotiate the lease that was coming due. And so in good faith, we're continuing those negotiations, even though we anticipate that the new owner of the building to be the primary beneficiary of this. And is there anything further to discuss about the commission that's being charged here? Not at this time. Okay. Further questions or comments from committee members? Yeah, Mr. Curry,
I
please.
have a question. Was the buyer, he's made aware, but has he been involved in conversation? I just want to make sure he's totally, everything's been squared away with him, because obviously it's a 20-year lease, I want to make sure he,
Right.
the lease terms as well, he's known the building.
Well, obviously, we didn't know who the buyer would be until all of this had been submitted, but pretty much everything that we have submitted to GSA has now been given to Mr. Grimsley, so he's well aware. I think, why would we go ahead and try to extend a lease when we know we're not going to own the building? Whether we own it or not, GSA is a great tenant, and
Good for the downtown?
good for the downtown. The government pays their bills on time, and it's a very attractive tenancy. To have an 18-year firm lease kind of locked in, I think that probably made our sale price what it was. So it's certainly odd. GSA would be more than happy to kind of conclude the deal with Mr. Grimsley, but he has stated that he doesn't have the LLC that he needs set up yet. So as Mr. Gosted said, we're continuing to negotiate with him, and then that lease would be assumed, given that we have a closing scheduled for, well, I don't know that it's closing, but it's targeted for the end of this month.
I should say good for the city, not just good for downtown, good for...
Right. If for some reason we should continue to own the building, we would certainly want to keep
Yes.
GSA as a tenant.
The sale is not complete. It could go,
Correct.
and we would want a good tenant in there. Mr. Curry, if I could ask you a question based upon your expertise that you bring to the committee. There's a substantial amount of money being addressed here for a 20-year lease. We had assistance in negotiating this. A commission is a common practice for this kind of work? Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, for sure it's common practice, especially with any government or any corporate or anything like that. One thing just to consider was just that, oftentimes the commission's tied to with, and you can make the argument that that's the value is kind of implied when we were marketed for sale, that this would be renewed. The beneficiary will be the buyer, for the next 20 years. So put it this way, I guess, that commission wouldn't be payable or due until that executed lease, right? So we're planning on paying through the proceeds. Well, however, if the lease wasn't executed before close, then who pays the commission? Or has that been addressed? That was my one question. If it drags out for GSA, because it is the feds as well, and doesn't get executed for renewal until next year, and they've closed on the building, is the city still on the hook for that commission then, or how does that work? Or is that spelled out? That contingency plan?
That's a very good question. If I'm closing and I haven't incurred those costs yet, I haven't incurred those costs. It's hard to prorate zero at that point. So I think that's something that will have to be discussed, obviously, with the buyer, because he does get the benefit of all of the rent. Because this, I think the lease wouldn't come up until February of 2022.
Correct. And the commission is due 50% on execution of the lease, and then the balance basically at occupancy, which would be next February, when the current lease expires.
It just details that, again, whether it's through escrow or however you're going to deal with that, but you really got the timing has to work out perfect for it to play out perfectly. So just more or less throwing it out there on that liability and when everything occurs, so.
Another way of looking at it is there's an incentive for the buyer to complete the sale with all due haste. And in the meantime, we have earnest money if that sale were to fall through. Mr. Holt, please.
So just a process question here in an effort to make sure that any motion that we might make is clear. Just looking at the staff report here, and I'm just quoting it, to minimize conflicts with the sales staff is asking for authorization to renew the lease with terms materially similar to those outlined above. So I guess what I'm wondering is what defines materially similar? If, in what case would it come back to this committee, or do we have to give certain parameters with approval for a motion? If they come back and say, look, we can do this at a penny less a square foot, or, then
Right.
I don't think it needs to come back. But if it's significant, at what point would it come back to this committee, and what should any approval from us look like in terms of giving you the correct ability to properly negotiate them without handcuffs, if that makes sense?
Well, my verbiage was kind of vague because that was the reason for materially similar, because I don't know what GSA might come back with. The history with them is that it has been details, nothing substantive. And so, as I said, I think that we have hit the point where staff is very confident that they're basically satisfied with the terms, but as they go through their kind of nitpicky approval process, it might be, we need another form signed. If you look at that kind of laundry list of forms, there could be an issue with something that, to my mind, is not substantive but would need an amendment. So I'm giving you a non-answer, and I realize that. So I'm sorry.
And like I said, go ahead.
I can maybe answer.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It's, I think it's very hard to define what material or what isn't, right? I think you have to wait to see what the document appears, and I'm confident that Meredith or Ms. Richards and Mr. Brooks will probably contact me and say, is this something that we think we need to bring back? And if you have enough confidence in me to be able to review it and then determine this is a material change from what we had before, then we'd be, assuming we're still in the game, right, and we're still the title owner, we could bring it back to the Growth Fund Committee and the JDA for approval if there is that type of change. So you kind of have to, when you see a type of an analysis. Again, it's a non-answer, but that's the way I'd view taking a look at, see what we get from the GSA and then making a determination if there is something significant that we think we need to bring to the attention of the JDA, we'd do that.
So the motion could be contingent upon ongoing support or ongoing approval from the city attorney, something like that?
I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah, I think my question was going to be similar to Mr. Holtz around, if the GSA comes back and if, we only pay $16 a square foot instead of 17, if there gets to be a point where my concern would be, do you need to wait to bring it back to us to have to make a decision, or could we put some windows in there of what we're comfortable with? I don't know how this goes, or if these are, square footage prices that the new owner is comfortable with. I'm assuming that those have all been cleared with them as well, so that
Correct.
there's not something on the back end where they're going to try and renegotiate it
Right.
substantially higher rates.
Right. Mr. Grimsley has seen the numbers and
Okay.
is, as far as I know, he is,
He's comfortable.
bigger would be better, but
Sure.
And in fact, the motion that I just suggested, this is just a recommendation to the JDA. If they were to pass that motion, then it could be left to the JDA if they want that to come back to the committee or not.
Certainly. And again, I think we're in the state where we're moving towards, I mean, we got a closing date in the agreement of, I think it's October 25th. So I'm lasered in on closing the transaction on the sale, is what I'm trying to do. And if we're still in the game with respect to negotiating with GSA at that time, then we turn that over to Mr. Grimsley and say, knock yourself out, you're now the owner.
And that's only a couple weeks away, so the likelihood is he'll end up having to close this one out anyways if the feds move as slow as they sometimes typically do.
Mr. Curry?
Yeah, thank you. I have one more question. Mr. Richards, from the base rent, I don't think there probably won't be too much pushback. The one question I have though is for that operating base. So can city staff, can they validate that number? Because that's gone up quite a bit. I mean, it's gone up 50% compared to the previous lease. So there might be a question, I'm just preparing you, that the GSA may come back and say, how'd you come up with that, $9.80 a foot? Is there a cost? Can you back that up?
I'm going to ask Ryan Graff if he can field that one. Ryan, are you listening?
Yes, thank you, Meredith. So the operating costs did come from current city budget estimates that are approved for the building rent or the building itself. And so they have gone through GSA's initial review, and they haven't had any issues brought up to date. And they, based on what they have seen as far as the line item detail, and that includes things like electricity, snow removal, cleaning, all of those types of costs.
Thank you, Mr. Ruff. That's pretty much answered my question. Just want to make sure that they're aware of the 50% bump there, so.
Very good. Anything further?
I'm ready to make a motion.
We have a motion?
Do you want me to detail that motion? All right, I will move to authorize staff to renew the lease with terms materially similar to those outlined in the staff report and execute lease documents when they are received from GSA, subject to city attorney review and approval.
I'll second that. Nicely done, Mr. Fuller.
We have a motion
That's a
and a
very
second.
good motion.
I came up with that all
And a
my own.
nod from the city attorney, so very good. Any further comments, questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Next on the agenda is an award bid consideration, but that will be greatly informed by the information-only item that follows it. So I'm hoping to get a motion for to modify the agenda so that we can hear the information-only item first before we consider item 4.
So moved.
I have a motion from Mr. Crary,
Second.
second from Ms. Whitney. Any further comments, questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign, motion passes. So we'll move to the item 5, information-only Career Impact Academy, CIA update. Mr. Field.
Hey, Mr. Weber and members of the Growth Fund Committee, I have with me today is Eric Ripley is here for Grand Forks Public Schools, Becca Kruger from the Grand Forks Region EDC, and John Onken from True North. And they've been part of this team that are going to come up here later and do a team approach of what progress has been made. And there's a case statement that's attached to this item, and a lot of exciting news as it's moved forward. Also, Tammy Lazur is here from our assessing department, and Brandon Baseflug he is here also. Bev Kellings also works. So there's been a lot of progress. I think we were last here maybe a month or so ago. I can't remember, time evaporates. But I just want to show you a few things. And I think you rightly want this information briefing before you approve the abatement and disposal on this particular project. I want to highlight a few things. As you recall, when we were first here, the city of Grand Forks purchased, I'm going to call it the former Holiday Inn site because that's what's better known as. And so there's 2 parcels that we purchased. It's called the Grand Forks Inn and Suites on the map here. One is the major parcel, and then there's this smaller parcel. So all told, the value of that we had through our assessing department and Ms. Lazur put this map together is $1,144,400 if you add those two parcels together. And so one of the concerns was, I recall we purchased the property for $450,000, went through growth fund JDA, but we wanted to know what the cost of abatement and demolition would be. And so the next item up that we're asking for action is for that, and that's for the contractor to do everything. From one thing to the next is $444,150. So if you add the 450 plus the 444,150, that's $894,150. So our goal was really to be under $1 million, and I think we've met that goal. And when I was here previously, I just was stating the value when we purchased this, the $1 million, 5,900, and there is an additional parcel that we also added value to, and that's that 138,000. That's in that bluish purple color. So I think we got a good deal here as part of this. As we move forward, this site has been the #1 site, and I know the group will come in more. And so what we wanted to do, they'll talk more about this. We want to make sure it fits on the site here as we move forward. And they'll come up here and talk about, there's been a lot of planning that has taken place. This is a phase 2 drawing that you see with everything in there. And of course, there's a budget of $20 million for this particular project. As you recall, it's a $10 million ask from the local community. It's a $10 million ask from the state of North Dakota. And one of the goals of with the local community, what we can raise for the $10 million was be $5 million from the public sector and $5 million from the private sector. And you'll have a team come up here and approach you on that. Again, this is phase 1, and JLG is currently the architect of this particular facility. With that $20 million budget, and these are conceptual drawings, obviously. These are conceptual estimates, and it looks like we can accomplish phase 1 with the current budget. And again, we keep mentioning 20 million, and hopefully we can move beyond that. Phase 2 would require additional funding, but you don't know what the numbers are until you bid them, too. So that's kind of where we're at from a building perspective. So with that, I think even if everything falls apart, we think we're going to move forward with a Career Impact Academy. This looks like this is the preferred site. Looks like there's plenty of room for the initial phase development. There's room for growth on this particular site. And if you look at the purchase price plus the demolition abatement, it was a good purchase and at a great location. And I think we got a good deal on this. So with that, I think as Mr. Basefood will come up and talk about the particular bids, but I'd like to hand it over to Becca Kruger to give you an update.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Ms. Kruger, welcome.
Good afternoon, members of the Growth Fund. Thank you for having me here. I have to say, prior to this year, I maybe used the word CTE in a sentence once a month, and now I'm up to about 100 times a day, so happy to be talking about it here and add to that number for today. So as Mr. Phelan mentioned, we have had some significant progress made both on the location and on the programming, as well as industry engagement along the process. And so I'm here to talk about some of that today. The first, as Mr. Phelan mentioned, was we have gone through a site selection process and a rubric scoring. And so the first thing we did was we had a committee of folks who are serving on our Career Impact Academy Steering Committee go through the rubric, and we looked at 5 different things. We looked at access for both Grand Forks Public Schools students and then also the surrounding rural school districts. We also looked at proximity to industry. As you know, the Career Impact Academy, the goal is to help bolster our region's workforce and introduce students to careers in the community and our region. So we also looked at the ability to expand. That's important as we consider the growth of the Career Impact Academy. We also looked at site amenities, things like parking and security, those types of things, as well as cost. So those are the 5 different things that we were scoring sites based on. All told, we reviewed in depth 5 different sites, including including this site here. And then we hired on a great architectural and engineering firm, which happens to be JLG Architects, who are working very closely with a group called Boundary Studios. And that group is specifically, they build CTE centers and work with CTE programs, help develop CTE programs across the nation. They also independently use the same rubric to go through and look at the 5 different sites, as well as AE2S, which is they're contracted with them. All 3 groups independently came up with this location as the best site location for the Career Impact Academy. And so moving forward, that is the priority site that we would be looking at. Additionally, we've done a number of things, including public engagement sessions, student engagement sessions. We've begun the design of the building, as you can see, really looking at the space needs based on the programming that will be in the Career Impact Academy, or that we're projecting will be in the Career Impact Academy. And then we've also held a number of industry engagement sessions as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Eric Ripley to talk about the progress in terms of the programming that will go in the building. Eric?
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Kruger. Mr. Ripley, welcome.
Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Get a chance to provide an update to your group about the Career Impact Academy. Unlike Beck, I use CT in my vernacular all the time. But so Eric Ripley, Director of CT for Grand Forks Public Schools in the Grand Forks Area Career Technology Center. And certainly, just given the role that I play within the district, programming and what courses will be delivered is key in my mind. And I think very early on, we wanted to make sure that we designed a facility that fit the programs, not the other way around. And so my appreciation to JLG and Boundary Studios on really taking a look at the programs that we want to try to offer, and let's make sure we have the right spaces to be able to effectively deliver them. Really, we looked at a three-pronged approach when we talked about programs. One would be as existing programs that we currently have being delivered at our primarily secondary level, so at Red River or Central High School and our surrounding communities. Programs that maybe we're delivering that should stay, that maybe makes sense to stay in those high schools. I'll just pick out one, marketing education, for example. They have their school stores in their high schools. Those are spaces that don't really need specialized equipment or labs. They maybe should just stay right where they're at. I think that makes the most sense. But we have programs that are current facilities that maybe do not have the right space, and medical careers would be probably top of the list. Think about Central High School. Probably wasn't built with the concept of having the medical careers laboratory in that space. And so we're doing the best we can with what we have. But our space constraints are also resulting in us turning students away. We can't have the ability to, we're limited by capacity in those areas, we're limited by the number of instructors we could have. And so you take a look at a program like that definitely meets industry demand and student interest, and this type of facility could present that a much better option for them. And then the third bucket would be programs that we have not offered or are not currently offering. That really lines up with 3 key aspects: student interest, industry demand, and post-secondary options. As a reminder, we have 3 post-secondary partners at the table as part of our steering committee. That includes University of North Dakota, and includes Lake Region State College, which is based out of Devils Lake, but has presence here in the Grand Forks community. And then obviously Northland Community Technical College in East Grand Forks, which is a great partner of ours as well. And so having all 3 of those post-secondary partners allows us to design programs that can start that student career awareness at the high school level, allow them to get into that career pathway or track, and offer the ability to gain dual credit articulated credits at the post-secondary level, which then leads into meeting the industry demand for our region. And so that's the way that we've approached designing our programs. Where we're at right now, just to kind of give you an update, is we are envisioning offering programs in the area of health sciences, precision agriculture, computer science or information technology, welding, engineering and robotics, culinary arts, building trades, automotive services, aerospace and unmanned systems, and advanced manufacturing. Again, that is conceptually all that we want to offer. Again, phase 1, phase 2 approach, we might have to trim back on that a little bit. But again, we're doing some additional surveys of students to find their interest and continued work. But this is where I've really enjoyed spending the time working through with our various partners on that. And then obviously a big part of the grant, as Becca talked about, is the need to raise that private industry commitment. And nobody better to speak on that on behalf of our group than John Onken from True North. And so I'd invite John up to the podium, and he can speak towards not only from his perspective and his company's perspective, but also the work that that committee is doing. So, John?
Very good. If I may quickly,
I'm sorry.
that list of programs, is
Yes.
that ranked in any way, or is that?
It is not. Great question. It's not ranked in any way, not presented in any way. Again, these are secondary programs that are electives, and so really student interest is going to help drive whether or not those programs are offered. But we do think that there is a demand and a need to offer something in all of those areas if we have the ability to do so.
Very good. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you for the question. I apologize. Any other questions?
I think piggybacking on that, how do those programs relate to the phase 1 versus phase 2 and their implementation if you can't get all of them to go in phase 1?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and certainly as Becca talked about working with Boundary Studios, just actually had a call with them earlier today in GLG, looking at is there an opportunity to blend some of those programs together, those programs that have flexible spaces. I think about a program like engineering, robotics, information technology, the space probably looks very similar for all three of those. And so while there might be three different programs, could they all be offered under the same space? And I think the design of the building is flexibility so that we're not locked in. And part of that is we need to be able to be flexible to be able to offer as many things as we can. But also we know that the careers that are being presented today for students may not be the careers that we want to present to them in 10 years or 15 years or even 5 years. So the ability to modify this space I think is very important. Great question.
Quick question, too.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for
Yes.
being here. It's not just student related also, right? It's for adult learners also for after hours or any of that. That's a huge component as well, correct?
Yes, sir. Thank you for bringing that up. As I indicated with our post-secondary partners, certainly they have visions of utilizing this space for adult learners. We're looking at like a corporation like TrainND, which provides industry customized training, utilizing space like this. And certainly industry partners as well. One of the design aspects of the facility is a large multi-purpose room that can be utilized for industry partners to bring in, training events and things of that nature. So you're exactly right. We, since the very beginning, have said this cannot just be a K-12 facility. It's much more of that to the community in the region. Excellent question. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ripley.
Thank you very much. Mr. Onken?
Mr. Onken, good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, or good evening to each of you. So I just wanted to share my thoughts around the industry and the Career Impact Academy and what it really offers. And I think of my day-to-day work intentionally working with recruitment. And it fits every industry, whether it's hospitality, whether it's city employees, whether it's engineering firms, technology. And I look through a generic lens of that. So I get feedback, whether it's the home builders industry, whether it's other aligned industries in my game, ag and construction, education, medical. And we have to be very intentional. And the first time I got involved with the meeting, and I was sitting across from Todd, and I said, this is really clearly kind of a no-brainer. I didn't quite say it in those terms, did I? It was really kind of shit or get off the pot, right? We have this opportunity for grant money that we can accelerate and do something great in our community. And if you think about what you pay forward in investment in this, and what you gain from student exposure to the industries that we all have, and we align in many ways and we don't in others, the student and the adult learner have the opportunity to stay closer to the community, see what really happens in my ag space versus what they might believe happens, see what is in the home builders industry or see what's in an engineering firm over here, whatever. And they have the opportunity to learn, get advanced credits, take it to a 2-year school, take it to a 4-year, go all the way to a PhD, whatever they want. But we have the intentional opportunity to invest in our students and bring great exposure, which we have had a lot of more restrictive opportunities in terms of some of the trades degrees and knowing how to take that and really run with it. This Career Academy gives a whole new look to it, a whole new vibe, a whole new sense of engagement and brings people closer to stay in our community and feed the needs that we have as an industry, in all industries that we play into. And if we don't do this right, I really think it's a negative, because we have best practices around the state and different states around us and how they've done it, and I think we can learn from those things, and I think we can put something really wonderful together. So, you know, kind of as the champion this, I look at every industry, and one of the big efforts we're making is trying to share that story to all of the people that are in this business to win, right, and do it right. And I hope it turns out to be a great success. I see that happening, and I see that our community, when it doesn't matter if you're going to a small gas station over here or something over here, what do they say? We don't have talent that works or does the right thing or want to stay here. And you can provide great opportunities for them. And if you look at the pay scales that are in my industry, it's phenomenal the way it's happened, and you can play that across the board. So I'm just excited to be able to hear the support and be a part of it, and if you've got any questions, I'll certainly take them.
Very good. Thanks for the informative and effective presentation from everyone. One question I have for you, it's a bit procedural. Is this presentation going to be given again at the JDA? Yes. All right. So for the committee today, actually, while it's very useful for us to understand the long-term intention, our decision today is that if the property is purchased, contingent upon that purchase, are we willing to recommend approving the award bid to basically take care of this property, to remove the blight and to prepare it for development? We're not deciding whether there should be a Career Impact Academy, is that the term I start using? Very good. Here or not, our job is to decide whether we recommend awarding the bid. But we can ask questions.
I think he had a question,
yes.
yeah.
Mr. Curry.
Yeah, I was going to ask just how much you could disclose on like how the funding's coming from. I know I've heard, and maybe just for the sake of everybody's time, I mean, you guys are going to hash this out probably multiple times, and I can just watch it on YouTube. So I'll save all the questions for the JDA and stuff, and I've heard in other committees.
So we have commitments made already, and I don't know, Becca, if you have anything on track with that, but we meet every week on Friday and go through the list, right? The list of any business in our region or community that would tie to this. And so we're trying to be very tactful and intentional about how we go about it and share the story. And hopefully, without asking too hard, that funding will come, right? The people will come, so to speak, excuse me. And we can make this a greater reality than it is right now, just sticking to the $10 million part of it, right?
So I guess even higher level, because it's the application date is December 1st, Becca, correct? December 1st. Are we on track? Everything's looking good for that? Okay, that's mainly more or less. Sweet.
Still need me?
Nope, that's great. Thanks, John.
So we have hit the fundraising trail hard. One of the things that we needed to concern ourselves with was what types of programming were going in there. So that really is going to help inform our fundraising strategy, obviously. We have firm commitments. The school district has already guaranteed $1 million of ESSER funds. We are going before the county commission tomorrow to ask for $1.5 million to support this project. The EDC board will be hearing a request for $250,000 this week to support this project. The Chamber of Commerce also has indicated support of this project to the tune of $25,000. We have also secured some relatively large private industry, which you will be hearing about this week, but I don't want to get ahead of the formal announcement and big publicity splash. So if you'll forgive me on that one, just know that you can watch the papers and I'm sure that they will tell you about that. So we have some really, really positive momentum when it comes to fundraising, and we certainly hope that the city of Grand Forks will also support this project financially.
But of course, that's not our decision today. Mr. Phelan, please, go ahead.
If I could have the map one more time, I just want to discuss this. You did approve the purchase. The JDA approved the purchase. There was a line item regarding the abatement. What we're here to say is, even going back further, we thought it's in the city's best interest to demolish this Holiday Inn, get it ready for redevelopment, whether that's with the Career Impact Academy or whether it's just for private development. I think what we're showing is that we've stepped forward. We're going to make this developable property again. And so even if the worst case scenario, this doesn't come through, we have a property that we're ready to market. The one thing I do want to point out on this map, just because we're trying to maximize the city's contribution or the JDA's contribution. So I mentioned these two properties. I failed to mention this. So I've been in discussions with Julie Riga, the CVB, and this parking lot is well underutilized. So I asked Ms. Lazar to look at what the value of this property. This property right here is owned by the city of Grand Forks. It's a former booster pump station for the Grand Forks Air Force Base. We moved it further west by the airport. And so this would be drawing this property in from the city of Grand Forks, and that would add another, looks like 591,000 that we could use as another in-kind match to get us to our $10 million match. And so obviously that's in the city of Grand Forks' hands, but I just wanted to demonstrate we're trying to put this whole parcel together, whether it's for a Career Impact Academy or whether it's for private development. These are properties that should be redeveloped and better utilized than they are currently.
Fantastic. Very useful to have that context. But again, the decision we're being asked to make today, based upon our previous approval to purchase, to make this purchase, now if we're going to own it, we need to clean it up and get it ready for development. That's the job of the JDA in this case. And Mr. Baseloop.
Mr. Weber, members of the Growth Fund Committee, so what you have in front of you on the staff report is basically the process that we went through. I'm going to be transparent. This was a very cumbersome bid process, not normal type stuff that we do. Originally put out basically two options. Staff got a lot of feedback from contractors, not only locally, but throughout the nation, that I don't know if we can do this. So we actually worked hand in hand with people.
Is it issues with asbestos?
That was the biggest thing,
okay.
was the asbestos. And what we were trying to do is do some in-kind from the city side. Okay, if you take it down and we do the asbestos or removal. So that's why you have it in front of you. There was an addendum. There was an A, an A1, a B, and a B1. And so as you look at it, we had to analyze all those bid numbers that came through, and then in addition to my due diligence, or staff did due diligence with the folks out at Public Works to see if the city could provide any part in this. And the easy answer is, at this time, we can't. There's just, we don't have the equipment that would be necessary. We'd be putting a risk to ourselves as we would pay for the abatement. So the recommendation in front of you to move forward to the JDA would be approve it at $444,150 to Berger Enterprises, contingent on all the documents being signed. Any questions for myself on the process?
Thanks for the work involved. The asbestos is, difficult to work around.
Yes, it was, and that's all the staff. I'm just reporting to you, so.
Very good. And so with that, I'm going to consider closing the information-only item and move to item number 4, award the bid demolition abatement of 1210 North 43rd Street, former Grand Forks Inn and Suites, and that's the decision for us here. Questions or comments? Mr. Holt.
Mr. Chair, so tagging off of the last agenda item into this agenda item, I work for the firm that is designing the Career Impact Academy. I think I've heard from Mr. Gostet enough.
Yes.
I think I know what to do here.
Good.
Knowing that this site is going to be purchased and this site work would need to be done regardless of whether the Career Impact Academy goes there or not, I feel comfortable voting on this if there are no objections from the committee. However, I wanted to declare that for the record. How'd I do?
This may be only the second time that we've done this correctly. Is that right?
Yeah, you did it absolutely spot on.
Great.
You declare your conflict, and then the other committee members can move to allow Mr. Holt to vote.
I move to allow Mr. Holt to vote.
I will second that.
Have a motion and a second. Further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Holt. And with that, we are now on the agenda item. Looking for comments, discussion, or perhaps a motion.
I move approval to award the bid to Berger Enterprises for alternative A. And actually, just to clarify, I'm sorry, before I do that, that would be, they would remove the asbestos and removal, they would pretty much do it all, total
Yes,
package.
they're doing
Yeah.
everything. We'll do some in-kind stuff.
Yeah.
You know, the city will provide water,
Yeah.
things of that nature, but it's the whole package.
Okay, just confirming that. Yeah, then motion to approve the bid to Berger Enterprises in the tune of $444,150, subject to the approval of all the documentation and proper permits and whatnot from City Attorney's Office.
Very good. We have a motion from Mr. Curry
I'll second.
and a second from Ms. Dockler. Very good. Further questions or comments?
I think my only other question would be, if a Career Impact Academy was to go on this site, does this 444, just to clarify, gets added to the in-kind that can be contributed towards the 10 million match on the grant, correct?
Mr. Weber, and that's a question I've asked. I'm going to give you the second-hand answer, is that I've been told no. What I've been told by the state's going to count the match of the value of the property. And so the mitigation that we're going to do will not be able to count. We'll go through the whole process, but that's what I've been told initially, that that's 400 and some thousand will not be able to be counted towards the match.
But with that being said, the assessed
Thank you, Mr.
value,
Phelan.
the cost of the land, like your cost basis for the city is probably below the market value anyway. So the like-kind will actually still be around the million, we'll call it, versus their all-in cost of 850. So it's kind of getting counted without getting counted, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of clarify and make sure so there wasn't confusion and there was some transparency there.
Very good. We have a motion. Hoping for a second. Oh, Ms. Dockler was seconded. Yes, of course. And that's, any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. And with lots of time before the council meeting, looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion. Second. All in favor? Very good. Motion passes. Meeting's adjourned. Thanks.